Welcome back to Beat, Feet, and Retreat Military History. This is the second and final part of the review of Hacksaw Ridge by Mel Gibson. We left off last time with the 77th going up the nets and into the Meta Escarpment. So let's see if the second part of Mel Gibson's film is better than the first. So I'm going to pause it right here. So where is the spacing in this formation of troops moving up, right? If one shell were to land in the middle of them, it would injure, if not kill, all of them. So Captain Glover, played by Sam Worthington, if he were to allow his troops to move around the battle space as a human wall, he would be considered negligent of his duties and removed. So, not a good scene. So in this scene, we have the guns immediately turn and fire, right? So, right? So this shows a complete misunderstanding of the time it takes to formulate fire solutions on these old ships from the Second World War. And it also just shows a complete misunderstanding of Second World War gunnery in general, right? This is all done with paper and pencil. These are not computers, right, that are moving the gun and firing, right? These are all people doing calculations, loading the gun and firing it. Another bad scene.
Nobody can survive that shit.
Nobody can survive that shit. Yes, because it's an inferno. There's way too much pyrotechnics being used in this movie that's not accurate. Is this Game of Thrones? You know, like, where's the fire coming from? That was probably a 10-second scene of just fireballs just going off. And once again, I just have an issue with way too many pyrotechnics going on. Gonna pause it. So here's a scene I actually like. I like this scene because they seem to have gotten small caliber weapons to people who are non-riflemen, right? So Captain Glover has an M1 carbine. It looks like the radio operator has a grease gun. And if your primary role in the battlefield is not to shoot the enemy, then you're usually afforded a smaller, compact weapon. And this movie seems to get that right, which I like, and it shows a little bit of nuance, which this movie does not show a lot of nuance. So, well done, Mel. Okay. And thus begins the cheesy, overt violence. Violence is good in movies, but usually when there's less CGI and you use more squibs. So squibs are the little explosives, you put on, uniforms or the ground, and it puffs up dust or blood splatter when someone gets shot. If you use CGI in a war movie like this, pretty much you can always tell that it is CGI. And this movie heavily relies on it to the point where every time I see it, it just takes me out of the immersion of the movie. This part of the movie also could have been filled with interesting infantry tactics and or smaller harrowing firefights that take you out of the larger battle that's going on. But instead, what we're left with are a jumble of disjointed scenes that offer no nuance to this battle. All we get here are scenes of GIs dying. It's disingenuous and it's distasteful, and I don't really like watching it, to be honest. So, yeah. So, I already know the part of the movie we're coming up to. This is my least favorite scene of the movie. Right? So he literally picks up his dead friend and uses him as a human shield to spray the Japanese with his BAR, right, as he's advancing. Right? So when people get shot, the bullet usually goes all the way through the person. So using a person as a human shield, especially with large 30 caliber rifles like all these soldiers are using right now in this battle, would not occur. Also, would you really pick up your friend and, do what's being depicted in this movie? When I saw this in theaters, I literally started cracking up, and I wanted to leave.
It's gonna kick in real quick, Ralph. We're gonna get you shifted. Stretch out!
Oh, man. It almost looks like Desmond pins the morphine syrette to the man's jacket. Because in this time period, overdosing someone on the battlefield from morphine was a real issue. So you needed to know in that soldier's line of care how much morphine he's had. So what medics would traditionally do is pin the morphine syrette they gave him to their collar. And it looks like Desmond does do that in this scene. I think he does in a later scene as well. So some things are nuanced, some things aren't nuanced. Kind of interesting. I don't know what happened with the advising side of this movie.
Shoot anything that don't speak English.
Does that include Grease Sarge?
Particularly him.
So here we have the men like hunkering down for night, right? Which, if you know anything about the Pacific, this would be when the nightmare really sets in, right? If it hasn't already set in prior to this. But nighttime with the Japanese was probably one of the worst experiences in human history. And here is kind of a good place to talk about passwords, like Foxhole Passwords. I'm going to talk about, so in Band of Brothers, it does this well of showing passwords, like the whole thunder flash thing, right? I say thunder, you say flash, so we won't shoot each other in the darkness. In the Pacific, they had passwords for their foxholes. Here's another instance where you could inject nuance, where having passwords in the foxholes so that you know, like, this infiltrator, this person coming up isn't Japanese and they're just coming back from, you know, going to the bathroom or whatever. So, yeah. There's an opportunity here for nuance. They didn't take it.
In peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons.
All right, so darkness has set, and he's lighting a dart in the foxhole. Light discipline, right? He would not be lighting a cigarette at night unless he wanted to die. And this could be understandable maybe if he was like a new soldier, but this guy is, you know, obviously Desmond's friend, not friend. And he's obviously not using a trench lighter, so the flame's not concealed or whatever, so not accurate. Would not be smoking at night in a combat zone.
I'm an asshole sometimes.
Sometimes?
Yeah, all right. All right.
This is the most bland heart-to-heart I've ever seen. Not just in a war movie, but in general. We're back in combat, right? Obviously, I was not there at Okinawa or at the Maida Escarpment, but there was absolutely no military tactics being used here whatsoever. It's just a rabble, an absolute rabble.
I called artillery strike! Fall back!
No thought other than retreat and shoot was put into this scene. Here you have the Japanese equivalent to a possum party coming out, right? And unfortunately, the soldier's death would have been much more gruesome than just a slit throat in this scenario. The Japanese like to torture and humiliate. So I'll leave that for what it is. Now, Doss might have actually done this, but on screen it looks stupid as hell. I also love the fact that the grease gun seems to have an infinite amount of ammo. Wouldn't that be great if we all could have infinite ammo? So, got the Japanese on the top, right? We got the Americans in the bottom. Tactically, this makes absolutely no sense. I would hope that the U.S. Army would not have a cliff peak looking down into their triage area and command post, right? And if I was the Japanese, as soon as I push the Americans off that cliff face, you know, I would damn sure be standing on top of that cliff and lobbing grenades down, right? And it seems they just kind of come up for a little bit and they get pushed back off of a little firefight, which is not very Japanese at all, I might add. Yeah, this just makes no sense. This whole setup we got going on here. This is a bad scene. So we made it to the end of our first review, and it was not good, right? Hacksaw Ridge is not one of my favorite movies at all, by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, with Mel Gibson, so I like all of his other movies, right? Like Patriot, Braveheart are the big ones that come to mind, obviously. Not historically accurate. They take an absolute dog shit on the history that actually occurred, right? So does this movie. The difference between The Patriot and Braveheart, though, is they're actually entertaining. This is not entertaining. It's disingenuous. It's not done well. It's not done right. Basically, every other war movie, big war movie that's out is better than this and more worth your time. People are too easy on this movie, in my opinion. I get that it's about well, that's the other part I kind of want to talk about here. Get when I'm bashing on this movie, I am not talking about Desmond Doss, right? I have nothing but utmost admiration for the man and what he did in both Guam, the Philippines, and Okinawa. The man's an absolute hero, but this movie does not do him service. And I hate to say it, but it's true. Not a good movie. I guarantee you, though, the next movie that we review will be better. Thank you for watching our first review here at Beat, Feed, and Retreat Military History. We'll catch you on the next one.